It runs.
This is an update on the E34. This is the original wiring harness right here, and the only thing that's left hooked up on that is actually the transmission wires I talked about last time. The replacement harness that came with the engine is mostly wired into the body at this point, as well as the DME and the transmission computer. When I got inside the car, I still didn't have anything happening, so I was concerned that EWS was going to be an issue, which is the vehicle immobilizer. I did some research, and this vehicle is produced with EWS1. That was confirmed by looking at the DME itself, which is a 404 DME. So that one's pretty easy to defeat if it's necessary. I did some more digging, and then what I found is on this plug right here, which is the X20 connector. On pin 18 is the start signal. With the key in start, I got a positive signal, but the engine still wasn't starting. So at that point I was beginning to wonder, hey, is the starter missing because all the accessories on the front of the engine are also missing? Or maybe it's just not wired up. I got underneath the car, I checked, the starter was there, it is wired up, but this harness is so old that it's wired differently than what was indicated in the diagram for a 95 E34. The very, very early ones had the starter coming up here to these white cloth wires. Try and point to them right down there. So the one on the left is to power things inside the car, and the one on the right is the start signal. So I hooked battery voltage up to the start signal through this toggle switch that I use to do walnut blasting jobs on N54 engines with. And once I give it battery voltage on the start terminal, the engine turns over no problem. So if I hit this, cranks over no problem. Another problem that we're running into is there's no fuel. So usually when you put the key in run, you should hear the fuel pump prime, but we don't in this. I checked all the relays, they appear to be working, and then I applied battery voltage, again from here, to fuse 23, which is the fuel pump fuse. And the fuel pump still doesn't come on. So at this point, that means there's either a wiring issue from that fuse panel back to the trunk where the fuel pump is unplugged, or the fuel pump is bad. I'm guessing the fuel pump is just bad. Another problem, and this is actually a good thing we figured this out, there's a missing fuel line in this car. Over on the driver's side, kind of where I'm shining that light right now, is the feed line for fuel, but there was no return line. The return line coming off the engine is actually this line right here, but the line underneath the car is apparently missing. I found part of it is broken, so that has to be replaced before we can get it running. I already have a replacement fuel pump on its way, so that really shouldn't be too difficult, and after that the car should run. When I get inside the car, if I put the key in run and then crank the starter over with some starting fluid in the engine, it fires up. But as I'll demonstrate right now, if I just turn the starter, so I'm in run right now, if I turn the key again to start, nothing happens. So that just needs to be jumped to that start terminal inside the engine bay, and we'll be fine. Another issue I ran into is the transmission lines, the coolant lines, are disconnected, and there's now a huge mess on my floor because when we had the engine running, it was pumping the transmission fluid out onto the floor, so I need to hook that back up before the car runs again. And they're all back here in the trunk, which all needs to be cleaned out. And it needs to be cleaned out just to get to the fuel pump as well, because on E34s the fuel pump is actually in the trunk. So that's my update. The car runs, the wire needs to be cleaned up, and I still have to move the transmission wires over, but apparently this transmission will go into drive and reverse without electronic control, so the car should at least move even before I get that fixed. Yes, please. So I'm going to attempt to start this car. It's on starting fluid because the fuel pump's bad. Ready? One second. I don't know if you can see me in this video or not. Let's see. It runs. Alright, you turn it off.